United Nations Network on Migration in the Maldives. My name is Tabassum Mogduma. I'm the project officer at IOM Maldives. Before we start, please allow me to highlight a couple of housekeeping rules to ensure a smooth and productive experience for all. It would be great if you could kindly turn off your microphone whenever you are not speaking. If you have any questions, please type on chat box or QA box. We will try our best to respond. Just to let you know that this event is being recorded live and live streamed on IOM Sri Lanka and Maldives Facebook page. Without further ado, I would now like to invite the coordinator of the UN Network on Migration, Mr. Sarat Dash, IOM Chief of Mission for Sri Lanka and Maldives, and Director General Special Envoy for Bhutan and India.
Thank you, Mogduma. Honorable Chief Guest, Mr. Foreign Secretary of Maldives, the UN Resident Coordinator, Excellencies, Secretaries to the esteemed ministries of Government of Maldives, distinguished officials representing the Government of Maldives, colleagues from the civil society, NGO, academia, trade union, the private sector, and my dear colleagues from the UN, sister UN agencies. Assalamu alaikum and a very good morning to all of you. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a great honor for me to welcome you formally to the launch of United Nations Network on Migration in Maldives. As you are aware, the Republic of Maldives is a host to over 200,000 international migrant workers, making it one of the destination countries with proportional migrant workers in South Asia. Inbound migrant workers have greatly contributed to the Republic of Maldives' economic growth, filling a labor market gaps in the key sectors such as tourism, hospitality, construction, agriculture, fisheries, education, and more importantly, the health sector. However, the migrant workers in Maldives, of which approximately 60,000 are in irregular status, face significant challenges in terms of exploitation and discrimination. The COVID-19 pandemic has exceptionally exacerbated the pre-existing situation. Given the importance of migration in the country's economic development, the government and the non-government entities alike have a key interest in collaborating to ensure effective migration management that would maximize the development benefits of migration while minimizing the risk and vulnerabilities for the migrant workers. The Republic of Maldives' endorsement of the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly and Regular Migration in 2018 highlights the government's commitment towards safeguarding the well-being of its migrant workers living within the territory of the nation. To ensure effective and timely and coordinated UN response, UN system-wide response and support to the Government of Republic of Maldives in carrying out its migration-related objectives and priorities, the United Nations country team in Maldives came together and has established the United Nations Network on Migration in the Republic of Maldives, which is in line with the global initiative of the Secretary General calling for this United Nations Network on Migration worldwide. I am positive that the launch event today will create awareness on the United Nations Network on Migration in the Maldives, why we are there and what is the purpose and what we are trying to achieve, while also supporting in the enhanced understanding and awareness on the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly and Regular Migration. This will also ensure or support enhancing the cooperation among all the stakeholders, because the migration management is a whole of society and a whole of government effort. So it will generate or sensitize all stakeholders to acknowledge their role and responsibilities, and how do we all work together in ensuring the effective implementation of global compact for migration, safe, orderly, and regular migration in Maldives. I'm grateful that this morning we'll be joined by a group of distinguished and diverse set of speakers who will be joining us to initiate a timely discussion on the safe migration as well as on the human trafficking landscapes in the Maldives. The speakers and panelists will also be hearing from our impressive professional and policy practitioners with many years of experiences in the country in their respective fields. The first panel discussion will be centered around the implementation of the Global Compact for safe, orderly, and regular migration, while the second panel discussion will focus mostly on the way forward in eradicating human trafficking and irregular migration that will ensure the well-being of the migrant workers. I'm looking forward to all the insightful discussions that will undoubtedly raise from these fruitful and meaningful discussions that we are scheduling this morning. And I'm certain that these interventions will be helpful in mapping the way forward in Maldives to tackle the migration-related challenges and enhancing the development impact and benefit of migration. I'm grateful for all the panelists and also the panel facilitators who have kindly joined this morning, and we are looking forward to the discussion. I do not want to block you from listening from the better discussions this morning, and thank you very much again for joining us in this formal launch event of the UN Network on Migration in Maldives. Thank you, and look forward to your meaningful contributions today and beyond. Thank you. Magduma,
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Coordinator. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to invite now the UN Resident Coordinator for the Maldives, Ms. Catherine Haswell, to deliver her welcome remarks.
Honorable Foreign Secretary, Excellencies, distinguished government representatives and development partners, representatives from civil society, private sector, academia, media, colleagues from the UN family, ladies and gentlemen, assalamu alaikum to you all. It's with great honor that we convene this important discussion with national leadership and institutions committed to making migration safe, orderly, and regular for all, as we inaugurate the UN Network on Migration in the Maldives. Adopted in 2018, the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly, and Regular Migration, also known as GCM for short, is the first intergovernmentally negotiated agreement covering all aspects of migration, with its foundation being in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Being committed to the cause of ensuring safe migration for all, the government of Maldives voted in favor of the GCM. To assist the government of Maldives with the implementation of its commitments, the UN Maldives established the network in July 2020. As the resident coordinator, I have the pleasure of leading the UN team to advance more effective migration management support to our government partners through tailored support, which is also sensitive to the Maldives' unique migration context. As the UN's migration agency, the International Organization for Migration will act as the coordinator and secretariat of the UN Network on Migration in the Maldives. The network was established to ensure effective, timely, and coordinated UN system-wide support at all levels, national, regional, and global, in order to support member states for the implementation, follow-up, and review of the GCM, and to collectively address migration-related challenges in a way that prioritizes the well-being of migrants in countries of origin, transit, and destination. The network will help mobilise relevant external partners together with the government, civil society, migrant communities, the private sector, trade unions, national human rights institutions, academia, and the media in pursuit of the protection of vulnerable people. A UN Maldives approach will ensure that the well-being of migrant communities residing in the country will be considered in all migration-related programming. Migrant workers have provided an essential labour force in key industries such as hospitality and construction that have attributed to the growth of Maldives' economy. However, the COVID-19 pandemic has exposed the challenges migrants face, including human trafficking, labour exploitation, and difficulties in accessing healthcare and accommodation. Protecting the human rights of migrants is essential to Maldives' socio-economic development, while securing the well-being of all Maldives residents. With the launch of the UN network, the audience can expect a strong, united, and efficient response from the global UN family in all aspects of migration. An effective migration approach is a key element, particularly for a small country with big economic ambitions, in all policy making and efforts towards achieving sustainable development. The network will actively engage with migrant communities, the diplomatic community, civil society, and all other stakeholders working in the area, with also a strong focus on the media and other relevant organisations who are supporting to address migration challenges in the country. I express my sincere gratitude today to the Government of Maldives for its commitment towards implementing the GCM. There have been a lot of progress made in this area, and I know more is to come. The country has participated in and submitted its updates to the 2021 Asia-Pacific Regional Review of Implementation of the Global Compact, and I'm sure that you'll also hear more about the multi-track initiatives underway today from our panelists, which have been accelerated following the COVID-19 pandemic. Honourable Foreign Secretary, Excellencies, distinguished guests and colleagues, thank you very much for joining us today. I'm really looking forward to hearing the ideas and considerations of our panelists and to working with you all to support the Maldives in its efforts to regulate and strategically manage its migration policies. And you can continue to rely on the United Nations as your partner in this important work. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Resident Coordinator, for your continued support to the network. Ladies and gentlemen, His Excellency Mr. Abdullah Shahid, Honorable Minister for Foreign Affairs in the Maldives, has kindly delivered a video message on the occasion of today's virtual launch. Now, we'd like to share the message with you. His Excellency Mr. Abdullah Shahid, Honorable Minister for Foreign Affairs in the Maldives, has kindly delivered a video message on the occasion of today's virtual launch. Now, we'd like to share the message with you.
United Nations Resident Coordinator in the Maldives, Sarath Dash, Coordinator of the UN Network on Migration in the Maldives, and Chief of the Mission of the International Organization for Migration for Sri Lanka in the Maldives. Excellencies, colleagues, and distinguished guests, I'm honored to be a part of the formal launch of the United Nations Global Network on Migration in the Maldives. This marks a renewed partnership between the government of the Maldives and the United Nations. Over the years, we have seen the network reinvent and transform the face of safe and orderly migration in various parts of the world. It continues to flourish as a coordinated support system, one that promotes the human rights and well-being of migrant communities across the world. The network will allow us to breathe life into the visions outlined in the Global Compact for safe, orderly, and regular migration. Visions that stem from the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. visions that entail a world where no one is left behind, especially the most vulnerable, including migrants. I'm confident that the UN network on migration will be instrumental in our efforts to better protect the rights of migrants, in addressing trafficking in persons, in managing borders in an integrated manner, and in facilitating ethical recruitment practices and ensuring a safe, dignified, and voluntary return. Excellencies, the Maldives is primarily a destination country for migrant workers, especially from other countries in the region. Today, they mark up roughly 1/3 of our resident population. They fill the gaps in the key industries that drive our economy and development. They have invaluably contributed towards our economic development. Yet, they face challenges such as human trafficking, exploitation, and smuggling. The COVID-19 pandemic has further exacerbated these concerns. Migrant workers living in poor conditions have been exposed to greater vulnerabilities. The situation at hand called for an immediate intervention, and the government listened and responded. We ensured that migrant workers had access to flu clinics and vaccines, regardless of their legal status. We provided better accommodation to hundreds of migrant workers. We conducted awareness programs in their native languages. This is simply a manifestation of our mantra: no one is safe until everyone is safe. The government's efforts to promote safe and orderly migration remains unfazed in the midst of this unforgiving health crisis. We have continued the voluntary repatriation program for undocumented workers back to their country of origin. We have strengthened the Prevention of Human Trafficking Act to better reflect international protocols, to accelerate the elimination of smuggling and trafficking cases, and to promote and protect the rights of victims, including undocumented workers. We also recognize that this is a continuous process. We remain fully committed to addressing challenges, both in the short and the long term. Excellencies, the complexities of international migration are very real. No single country can find solutions to these shared challenges. International cooperation is the way forward. I take this opportunity to thank our neighboring countries, the United Nations country team, and the IOM. They have been on our side in our journey towards ensuring safe, orderly, and regular migration. Before I conclude, I would like to reiterate the government's full support to the UN network on migration in the Maldives. We look forward to meaningful engagement within the UN network in our journey towards ensuring safe, orderly, and regular migration. On migration, which I believe will be a coordinated, collective, collaborative force for good, one that values inclusivity and unity. I thank you. On migration, which I believe will be a coordinated, collective, collaborative force for
Thank you very much, His Excellency Mr. Abdullah Shahid, Minister of Foreign Affairs, for your kind message and encouraging us all the way. Ladies and gentlemen, it's an absolute honor for us as the UN Network for Migration in the Maldives to have our chief guest, His Excellency Mr. Abdul Ghaffur Mohammed, Honorable Foreign Secretary, for his kind and encouraging presence at this high-level launching event. We are also very grateful to IOM Regional Director for Asia and the Pacific, Dr. Nenet Motus, and Regional Coordinator of the UN Network, who is also present today with us for this event. She has also kindly delivered a video message, which we will share on our social media. Ladies and gentlemen, now we are moving forward to our next segment. May I kindly introduce our first moderator of the panel, who would introduce the panel topic as well as the speakers in the panel. Ms. Akiko Fuji, Resident Representative, UN Development Program in the Maldives, has kindly agreed to be moderating our first panel discussion for today. May I kindly request Ms. Fuji to start the session. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Assalamu alaikum. I am very delighted to welcome you all to this first session. As we heard in the opening just now, the adoption of the Global Compact for Migration is a great step towards the ambitious objectives of protecting interests of migrant countries of origin, transit, and destination. But we also heard just now, we also recognizing the challenges as well as opportunities in the Maldives. And we also want to acknowledge the great commitment which has been made by the government of Maldives. So the first panel session will discuss the priorities for the implementation, review, and the follow-up in the specific context of Maldives. And I would like to request our audience to type in questions during our discussions, anytime in the discussion. So your chat box is open throughout the discussion. And the panel and I will try to do our best to pick up as many questions from you as possible during this interesting discussion. So without the further ado, I would like to introduce the great panel members for today's first session. And the first panelist is Ms. Mariam Nazima. Ms. Nazima is Deputy Minister, Ministry of Economic Development, and she has more than 20 years of experiences in the area of management of migrants. And prior to her appointment to the current role as Deputy Minister since 2018, she served as the first president of the Employment Tribunal of the Maldives. And at the ministry currently oversees the program of migrant workers regularization and the voluntary repatriation program. So welcome to Ms. Nazima. And here with us, we also have the great honor to welcome His Excellency Rear Admiral Nazmal Hassan, High Commissioner of Bangladesh, here with us. His Excellency has assumed the duty of High Commissioner of Bangladesh in Maldives in 2020. And His Excellency entered in the Bangladesh Navy in 1986 and since then served in various roles, including as Director Naval Operations, Director Naval Intelligence at Naval Headquarters, and as Director General Civil Military Relations of Armed Forces Division under the Prime Minister's Office for 2015 and 2016. And here with us, we also have a pleasure welcoming Mr. Biswash Bhatta, Chargé d'Affaires AI, Embassy of Nepal. Mr. Bhatta joined the Foreign Service of Nepal in 2014, and he has assumed various positions in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Nepal, including in the Regional Organization Division. And previously, he has also worked as Vice Consul in the Consulate General of Nepal, Hong Kong, prior to the assignment as Deputy Chief of Mission since 2019. And also here with us, please welcome Ms. Asias Rirwina, Executive Director of Transparency Maldives. Ms. Rirwina is a governance advocate with over 15 years of experience with the public and private sector. So she currently serves as Executive Director of Transparency Maldives, and prior to joining the TM, Ms. Rirwina worked as the Company Secretary and Manager Investor Relations of Diragu, served also as the Financial Advisor in the Ministry of Economic Development for managing the public and the private partnership projects for Maldives. So with these great panelist members today, I would like to move on to the first discussion segment. And the first question to the panelist members is going to be, what we have heard, of course, the priorities and the commitment by the government of Maldives to the Global Compact for Migration and welcoming the network. But in your sort of current position and looking at the situations and issues and opportunities in the specific context of Maldives, what objectives of the compact and the priorities should we look at and should we pursue in Maldives? So that is the first question. And the floor is yours, Ms. Mariam Nazima. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Very good morning to all of you. I would like to point out some of the tasks taken in, which also covers or is the objectives of the GCM. Keeping that in mind, as I said, I would like to point out some of the actions that have been taken. First of all, I would like to highlight that the regularization program, which is the ongoing program from 2019 to tackle the issue of undocumented workers. Right now, we have over 43,000 expats registered in the program. And we are continuing to get them into the legal system. And the work is, even with the COVID situation, the work is still ongoing. Also, we have introduced to enhance the online expat system used for verification, monitoring, and management of expatriates. On the legislative forefront, there are certain amendments brought into the Employment Act, as well as the regulations made under that Act. Among the changes to the Act, rules defining overtime, service charge, right to employees, minimum wage, wage advisory board also have been formed, and functioning of the employment tribunal, provision for employment and training opportunities for locals, as well as standards of accommodation and living conditions for workers have been brought under this Act. Also, the revised regulation of the expat workers now enhances the coverage on the issuance of work permits, improved procedure for recruitment of expatriates, and other miscellaneous items as well. Several policies related to recruitment of expatriate now encompass the amendment to the regulation. I would like to point out some of those mentioned. Policies on employers providing accommodation for expatriate has been a major development. Previously, there was no guidelines in provision of accommodation. However, with this government, we have established and we have brought in with the regulation the minimum basic accommodation standards that should be made available to the workers. And also policy on absconding of expatriate workers, how the employers should treat them, and what conditions we would consider as the worker absconding the place of work. Also, policy on regularizing disciplinary measures for breach, health insurance coverage for expat also have been included in our changes to the regulation. The COVID-19 has devastating impact on the country, and to mitigate the exploitation of expatriate population, several steps were taken to address this situation. Among this, about 12,000 expatriates were moved from highly congested accommodation quarters to government facilities, and they were provided with food and medical facilities during this time. Close to 10,000 undocumented workers were voluntarily returned to their countries. And the regularization program, as I said, is being still continued even in the case of the COVID situation. And as pointed out, vaccines are also freely given to all migrant workers, irrespective of their country of origin or their ability to pay. Together with this, to strengthen and regulate the recruitment process, amendments were made to improve the recruitment process, provisions to blacklist employment agencies that breaches Employment Act, penalties on withholding passports, and charging recruitment fees from expatriates, among others, are areas where regulation in respect of expatriates was strengthened. So in short, what I have listed out is the points that the 23 objectives covered in the Gcm Objectives actually covers what the government of Maldives is trying to do in relation with migrant population.
Thank you very much for thank you very much for giving us the overview of the various progresses have been made by the Maldivian government with regard to particularly the regularization at policy level. Now I would like to move on to Excellency Nazmul. Obviously, a great number of migrant workers living and working in Maldives are from your own good country. So from your perspective, after hearing this overview, what do you think are the priorities in the current context? Over to you.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Ms. Akiko Fuji. It's a pleasure to be here online to attend this virtual event on UN Network on Migration. I thank the IOM and the entire UN system for kindly inviting me to participate in this event. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, to start with, I would like to point out that the objectives set for Maldives, the 9 objectives in line and with the spirit of the 23 global objectives, are quite pertinent in my opinion. However, in my personal opinion, they are also very demanding, and therefore it will require a tremendous amount of efforts from everyone concerned to actually implement those on ground and achieve the ultimate objectives. For Maldives, it is even more challenging because of the mere fact that the migrant population are almost 1/3 of the total population of the country. But it's important that we did make a start. The very adoption of the concept of GCM and its formation for specifically for Maldives, I believe is a good start. And the very event of launching today, I believe everyone in the UN system deserves heartiest congratulations for their efforts. Here I would like to also place on record the commitment that the government of Maldives has shown over the years to ensure the rights and privileges of the migrant population in Maldives, especially throughout the difficult times of the pandemic. I would like to reiterate that the government's effort to ensure the basic needs, especially the health services for the migrant workers, and a special mention of the provision of vaccination for all the migrant workers side by side their own citizens. It is something that is very praiseworthy and exemplary for the rest of the world. Out of the 3 aspects of our panel discussion today, I will only touch upon the implementation part of it. As a signatory to GCM, Bangladesh has full commitment to work together and share responsibilities in a global context for its part in implementing the GCM. As far as Maldives is concerned, bilaterally we are working closely with the government of Maldives, and we believe that the migrant community in Maldives, for which Bangladesh is a major source, are contributing equally to the economic development and common well-being of both our countries. That's why it is important for us to ensure that the migration are safe, orderly, and regular in nature. And to that context, we have signed a memorandum of understanding in February 2021, which entails the modalities by which the migrant workers can be recruited, can be employed, and their well-being can be taken care of by the government machinery and also the High Commission of Bangladesh in Maldives to a great extent. We hope that once implemented, this will give us a great dividend. And the other thing is, I would like to mention here is the repatriation, voluntary repatriation program that the Honorable Minister and Ms. Najim also mentioned. I think that was a great gesture from the government of Maldives, because at that crucial time, it was important for us, or both the governments, to ensure that this helpless and those who are volunteer, the migrant community, can return safely to their home country. What we could not achieve probably in this process was the ideal case of reintegration in the society. And I believe the UN system and especially the IOM will work in future to that extent, to that end, to achieve the reintegration program as well. And that reminds me to mention few of the other areas of objectives which are there in the 23 listed global objectives list. I will mention very quickly. The first one, which talks about maintaining a database. I think it is important for Maldives, and all of us should be able to support the government to maintain the database so that fact-based policies can be adopted. The second is objective number 4, which talks about proof of identity and issuance of documentation. And I believe very soon the regulation process will get back into full gear. The agenda number 5, which talks about the ensuring availability and pathways for regular migration. On record, from September 2019, the recruitment from Bangladesh has been suspended. I believe the government of Maldives will reopen it in order to allow regular migration process to continue. And then, of course, last but not the least, I talked about the reintegration, which could be an important point to consider in the objectives of Maldives list. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That is a great overview also from your point of view, and you have identified a number of key issues, particularly with related to the reintegration issue, as well as the data and the documentation availability. With that, I would also like to ask the same question: what are the priorities? But also, from your point of view, Mr. Bhatti, also the migrants and the residents here from your country in Maldives as well. So from that perspective, please share your views. Over to you.
Thanks, Akiko. Good morning to all, excellencies, respected panelists, representatives of UN, IAMs, and viewers. It's my honor and pleasure to be a part of this panel discussion. I would like to extend my thanks and sincere appreciation to the UN Network on Migration and the IOM Maldives and the government of Maldives for launching this historic United Nations Network on Migration. It was a very considerate decision of the government of Maldives to endorse the GCM in the year 2018, given the fact that the country hosts around 200,000 to 250,000 international migrants, a number which roughly accounts around 1/3 of the population of the country. So against the backdrop, that the Maldives, which hosts a significant number of the foreign employees, out of which roughly around 5,000 to 6,000 are Nepalese nationals. So in this context, I have highlighted from the global compact, I would like to highlight out of those 23, some of the GCM Objectives, which is very pertinent from the viewpoint of the stakeholder group I represent, that is from the Embassy of Nepal and the government of Nepal. So I would like to go directly to the GCM objectives. Objective number 1, collecting and utilizing accurate and disintegrated data as a basis of evidence-based policy. It is incumbent upon every government to invest in the collection, analysis, and dissemination of accurate, reliable, and comparable data, especially if the country is hosting a huge chunk of foreign migrant workers. The comparable data on the basis of sex, age, nationality, migration status. Also, it is very pertinent on the host government and also on the country of origin to disseminate information such as the immigration laws, requirements for entry, visa requirement, labor markets needs, skills required in the context of the country, and the migration laws, remittance transfer procedures, working condition, and the living condition, so that the potential migrants can make an informed decision before leaving the country of origin. So I think the government of, I would like to note that the government of Maldives has, I believe, done a fairly good job at maintaining a comprehensive database of migrant workers. During the pandemic last year, the data provided by the Immigration of the Maldives department was very helpful for us in managing and launching the rescue and repatriation works of the Nepalese migrant workers who were in Maldives at that time. So the objective number 3, providing accurate and timely information at all stages of migration. I would like to highlight this objective in the context that the newly arrived migrant workers should be provided with comprehensive information and legal guidance on their rights and obligations, including a glimpse of the national and local law of the Maldives, including a wide range of information regarding the residential permit, registration, and access to justice, and the procedure to file complaints, and other access to other basic services. So moving on to the next objective, I would like to highlight the objective number 4, ensuring that all migrants have proof of legal identity and adequate documentation. This is especially important and should be constantly monitored by the relevant government department of both the host country, that is Maldives, and the country of origin. And there should be active collaboration between the country of origin and the host country, so as to ensure that the large portion of the migrant population migrating to the Maldives have the proof of legal identity and adequate documentation. So objective number 6, facilitating fair and ethical recruitment and safeguarding conditions that ensure decent work. In my opinion, this is one of the most important GCM objectives that the government of Maldives should have special focus upon. The government should be especially vigilant about the existing and the potential exploitation, forced labor, including the denial of salary, confiscation of passport, and other things, and the complaints registered by the migrant workers should be swiftly addressed by the labor relation authority, including the labor tribunals. The recruitment agencies should be regulated, who are working in the public and the private sphere, and these migration agencies should be regularly monitored, and a multi-stakeholder approach should be taken in this regard. So moving on to next objective, strengthen the transnational.
Sorry, I will have to cut you short. We have other questions, of course, coming from the audience.
Okay, my apologies. I would like to
no problem.
Wrap it up and then quickly sum up it. The objective number 9, strengthening the transnational response to the smuggling of migrants. I would like to raise this issue in the view that the rackets of traffickers in Nepal, they are using the exotic destination like Sri Lanka and the Maldives and countries in the Southeast Asia for the transnational smuggling of Nepalese women. And the other objective I would like to highlight is the use of immigration detention as a measure of last resort in view of the large portion of migrant workers that Maldives holds. And the other is the empowering of the migrants worker and ensuring their full inclusion so as to attain the social cohesion in Maldives.
Mr. Bhatta, I think we will come back to you, perhaps, for more.
Yes, thank you. Okay, thank you. Please.
That is okay.
You can move on with the next panelist. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for sharing the great insights. So moving on is the next panelist. I would like to ask Ms. Rilvina, of course, coming from the great experience of working in the civil society as well as private sector, but also have experience of working in the government previously. So from that sort of dynamic, diverse experience, can you share with us what you think is the priority in this context? Thank you.
Thank you, Akiko, and a very good morning to you and to my fellow speakers, and a warm welcome to everyone who is listening and joining us today. I would like to start off by expressing my appreciation to the UN and IOM for giving this platform to a civil society organization, especially as we embark on this important journey. It is my absolute pleasure to be part of this conversation and this dialogue. As highlighted by previous speakers, migration has played an important role in our economy's growth, and over the past 30 years, migrant workers have become a permanent feature in our labor market. Yet, migrant workers remain one of the most marginalized communities in the country. I think the lived reality of thousands of migrant workers is that they face numerous threats, despite the several efforts by the governments and civil society organizations to support them. Our work in the area of migrant workers is quite limited, actually, but we have been providing free advocacy and legal advice. And 51% of the cases that we receive to our center are from migrant workers, most of them from undocumented migrant workers. And roughly 30% of all the cases we get is related to wage theft or non-payment of wages, and often for extended periods, withholding travel documents and identification, and also complaints about inhuman living conditions. I think one of the biggest issue is the lack of proper redress mechanisms for those who are victimized and through the recruitment process or in the labor market, and the enforcement of existing laws and regulations victimize them further, especially those who are in forced labor conditions. One of the biggest challenges for us as well when we extend support is language barriers, which further limits access to their justice. And I think through the network, this is one area where we can work closely with. When we speak about ending the long-lasting labor rights violations and human rights abuses migrant workers face today, for us, the number one outcome of should be that we must bring an end to the ongoing violations. And as a civil society organization advocating for their rights, we feel that Objective 6, which focuses on facilitating fair and ethical recruitment and safeguarding conditions that ensure decent work, and Objective 17, which focuses on eliminating all forms of discrimination and promote evidence-based discourse to shape perception of migration. These are the two most critical objectives in our opinion. We believe that a whole of society and whole of government approach is needed to achieve both objectives, which if successfully implemented can help contribute toward other objectives as well. Previous reports suggest, and there is evidence of prevalence of fraudulent recruitment practices and exploitation in the country. I think the pandemic has brought their plight to the spotlight very, very clearly. And we welcome and we actually appreciate the support the government has provided to migrant workers, but still there's a lot more to be done, we feel. Several migrant workers who come to the Maldives through these fraudulent practices are already in debt. When they come, they are in bondage. So their vulnerability is quite high even when they come here. So we feel that it is important to start addressing the drivers of drivers that contribute to their vulnerabilities, and to ensure that from the very onset, migrant workers are recruited fairly and ethically. And we ensure that we provide them with decent and safe environments to work and live. We call on the government to continue with its reform of labor regulations. We welcome what Nazi has been doing. I think we all support what's being done, but at the same time, I think there's still a lot to be done, especially when we speak about bringing perpetrators to justice. One of the biggest challenges in the Maldives is that we can't bring those who are actually committing these crimes to justice. So that's one area where we would like to call the government to continuously focus and make sure that these are not ignored. We call on the development partners, our international development partners, our international community to support the state and CSOs to build capacity to help monitor and implement these regulations and help break the protective wall that perpetrators are hiding behind. At the same time, we call on other stakeholders, including everyone in the supply chain and the community at large, to come together to create and promote decent workplaces and way of life. I think the second biggest challenge for us, or not challenge, but what we would like to highlight it that is xenophobia is creeping into our society, and it's the truth now. And I'm not hesitant, but I'm sad to say that there are instances of state-sponsored xenophobia in the past, which has contributed to society accepting this as an acceptable way of treating migrant workers. So we feel that there's an urgent need for all stakeholders to work together to eliminate discrimination and condemn these acts, and offer counter expressions and acts that can work against xenophobia. We need to focus on promoting an open and evidence-based discourse, and we need to work together to make sure our community, our country is a safe place for everyone to work, irrespective of where they are coming from and what kind of job they are doing. So I think that's it from our transparency motives for now.
Rina, yes, you have covered quite a variety of issues, and those are very, very useful for moving forward with the discussions. I'm just being mindful of the time as well. We have limited amount of time, so what I'm going to do here is I will start picking up some of the questions which are, of course, coming in from the audience, as well as, of course, the panelists. You can raise hand if you have the specific, of course, opinion and insights that you would like to share anytime. But picking up, I think, some of the sort of strong, observations about some priorities in the current context. I would like to go back to Ms. Nazima, if it's okay. There were some issues, of course, raised about the legal side, or legal protection side, access to justice, but also enforcing the labor governance raised from the various stakeholders here. Would you like to perhaps share a little bit about some of the specifics that the government is implementing in that context? And if I could mix one of the questions actually coming from the audience here received is about the data. So how you are using the data for following up the implementation of some of these labor issues. And the question is particularly about women migrant workers employed at household level, helpers in the Maldives. Does the government has the sufficient data and publicly available? And how are you using these data for decision making and the policies? So if I could just mix a couple of things, and over to you.
Yeah, thank you. With regard to some of the speakers have spoken about also, I think one of the main areas that we also have found out is that having a labor market information system where data is there right now, but then having it cleaned data and how it could be used and making it available to the public is a very important role. So right now, with the help of ILO and IOM, we are in the process of establishing such a cleaning of data and having it as being used as labor market information so that it can be used in policy making. Right now, with regard to women migrant workers, we do have the data, but as I said, previously it has not been actually used in the correct way, and it was just like it's sort of collecting information but not disseminating and using it for proper usage. So ministry now, as I said, with the help of ILO and IOM, we are working on it. And hopefully it won't be long before we can start using it for policy making. But right now, if there are any requests from any of the agencies to obtain this data, we do provide with them with the data. And I would like to also point out that certain concerns has been raised regarding Objective 6, that is facilitate fair and ethical recruitment and safeguard conditions that ensure decent work. I would like to say that 2021 February, we have introduced an expat management system where from anywhere in the world, a person can see whether the person has been given a valid entry permit to work in Maldives. Anybody, anywhere around the world can check on this. But most of the time, the very unskilled labor category workers are exploited. Hence, they might not be in a position to look into get access to our system and look into see whether the documentations are proper and all those things. But I think it's a very good development where before the sending country could even look into from anywhere whether this person has a valid entry pass to enter Maldives to work. And also we are up till now, there has never been any sort of information that we give or impart to the people arriving to work. Right now, we are working on developing an application where we will be communicating with the employees or the workers themselves. So maybe in another 2 weeks or 1 month's time, hopefully we will be starting using it. And with the help of all the consulates, high commissions, and all UN agencies, I'm sure it's going to be we can make real good use of it. So yeah, I hope if I haven't missed anything.
Yes, thank you. I think you're doing a great job responding. I think within the limited amount of time we have. But I think you have picked up an important element here, which is about the data and information availability. Also requires a collaboration from the different entities and entry points. And I have a great question coming from the audience here, which is directed to Your Excellency Nazmul on that point, because the question is actually, we know that the employment agencies are providing legitimate paperwork, but in reality, sometimes no jobs available, and which creates the loophole for these agencies to exploit migrants. How can the High Commission and the government of Bangladesh prevent such human rights violations following the country of origin, and with regard to going back to the paperwork and some of the procedures that Ms. Nazima also mentioned. So over to you.
Yes, thank you, Akiko. It's a very pertinent question, and I was expecting the question or something similar all the time. The question essentially is about the entire process of recruitment and its loophole, and also it questions the after effects on the migrant workers, and then the response of the government and, of course, the High Commission. I must admit upfront that there have been in the past loopholes in the entire recruitment process, and some unscrupulous agencies, both from Bangladesh as the country of origin and also at the country of destination, not only in Maldives, but in other countries as well, have taken undue advantage of those loopholes or the shortcomings of the system itself. On our part, the government of Bangladesh has a ministry which primarily deals with the expatriates' employment and welfare. Actually, it is called the Ministry of Expatriates Employment and Welfare, and it is trying to ensure by introducing new systems, new rules and regulations, so that proper and genuine process is followed by these agencies, and the offenders, wherever there are being brought to justice and being penalized. On a bilateral front, as I mentioned, we have signed a memorandum of understanding with Maldives, which has outlined the modalities of future recruitment process, where ideally the Ministry of Economic Development of Maldives, the Ministry of Expatriate Welfare in Bangladesh, and the High Commission will have a verification system, so that only the authorized and the workplaces where there are vacancies for people to come, they can only bring people from Bangladesh, the workers from Bangladesh. So this is one thing that has not always been followed in the past, and this has led to exploitation and human rights violation, unfortunately. And I'm not saying that it is easy. It is easier said than done. But if we all have an honest intent, and if we remain committed, I believe with the cooperation between the two governments, we can make a definite improvement in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, I think we are talking about the various sort of partners, coordination and the collaboration towards the same objective. And on that front, I have received the question to Mr. Bata. In this context, what do you think the coordination of all the relevant stakeholders, what sort of coordination would you foresee? And of course, you can mix your idea from the specific point of view of Nepalese government as well in this coordination aspect. Thank you.
Thank you, Akiko. Since migration is a very complex phenomenon, it involves multiple stages. It starts in the country of origin, and there is a transit state or many transit states, and it ends in the country of destination. It is very pervasive. So that means for any single entity, it is very difficult to control the trend, direction, or to manage all the tenets of the migration. So in this case, with regard to the around 5,000 Nepalese workers who are working in the Maldives, especially in the trying times like the pandemic, it is very pertinent that there should be a multi-stakeholder collaboration and systematic communication between these various stakeholders in order to achieve the safe, orderly, and regular migration. From the viewpoint of Nepalese migrant workers also, we are trying to develop a information portal, the Nepalese information portal. In fact, we have developed one, so which will try to give a glimpse about how it is about the laws and regulation about the visa requirement of the many countries of destination. We have developed an information portal, and the same way we have been continuously engaging with the Nepalese organization in Maldives. There are, in fact, we are a very well, we are a few but very well connected community. So if there is anything, we always try to take those things to our community leaders and our Nepalese who are working in the Maldives, especially who are working there since a long time. We are based in Colombo. That is why sometimes it's very difficult to reach out to every government agency. So those Nepalese workers who are working since a very long time, they are very helpful in this regard. So the government of Maldives, the Labor Relation Authority, the immigration, and especially the foreign ministry, we have been communicating on a regular basis just to ensure that the genuine interest of the Nepalese workers are being addressed. So since migration is a very complex, as I mentioned earlier, migration is a very complex phenomenon. It has various tenets. So it is pertinent upon every government. It is incumbent upon our government and the government of Maldives to have to take the multi-stakeholder approach in managing a safe, orderly, and regular migration. Thank you, Aki.
Thank you. Thank you for stressing the importance of coordination, particularly by having the regular conversations and communications between each other. I have a few interesting questions coming from the audience. Those are to Ms. Rilwina. I think you have articulated the several important issues from particularly the point of view of civil society. The question is also perhaps if you could suggest what are the measures that you would like to propose to tackle the current barriers that you have articulated in the earlier round, and also to include suggestions both to the government but also to private sector element as well, since you also have the experience of working in the private sector. So what are the measures that you may be proposing? So that's one of the questions. Over to you.
Thank you, Akiko. I think following on from the discussions before, one of the biggest challenges we face, civil society organization faces, language barrier. So we need, we feel that we need to do more work to empower migrant workers to come forward. While we have been providing legal advice and support for the last 8 years or so, that there are still limited, we don't get enough support because people are not aware of the systems or mechanisms to help them. So that's a very, very important area that we need to focus on. If we look at how the private sector and civil societies at large can support government and other state actors, I think the larger civil society, especially the media, can play a huge role in implementing Objective 17 and working towards eliminating xenophobia in the country. I think if we can create a more tolerant and more supportive environment, a lot of these issues we can address a lot of the issues. I personally am not a big fan of monitoring and policing. So I feel that the communities, all the players in the community has an equal role in making sure people are safe. So likewise, the private sector, including industry bodies such as MASI or MATI, who have a huge stake in this issue, they have to take on they have a big role to play in promoting business ethics and championing human rights and making sure due diligence exercises are conducted within their sectors to eliminate these risks. I think if we look at the government, there's so much capacity issue is everywhere. The government is burdened with a lot, especially with the COVID situation. So there is a lot that other actors can play to make the government accountable as well on their promises, and also to make sure we we create a safe space for workers who come to the Maldives.
Thank you. No, that is really great. I think we are coming towards actually, unfortunately, the end of the session, but I would like to perhaps give the opportunity for Ms. Nazima, if you would like to perhaps say, the final remarks, picking up some of the issues and the comments coming from the colleagues here. The floor is yours, and then after that, I will do the closing. Over to you.
Thank you. I'm just seeing on the chat, there are a couple of questions as well. One person have asked that how are we sharing this information with the local council? In fact, with the Decentralization Act, Ministry has to supply or impart the information with the local councils. In fact, last week we met with the local government authority and to discuss ways in which we could share this information because we want to make it as easy as possible for the employers as well as the employees, and also to have this in a manner which we can, the government can actually monitor and if need be bring better changes as well. With regard to the discussions we have said, I agree with Rilo that as partners, we have to be working as partners and play a major role. Each and everyone can play a huge role in bringing actually achieving these objectives. More or less, a greater part of the objectives are being addressed. Maybe with regard to integration, we have been trying into their life, what we can do about it. And we are
I'm sorry, Ms. Nazima, you are breaking up a little bit. Would you like to perhaps turn off the video and maybe the sound could be better?
Is it okay now?
Yes, this is better. Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, as I said, we have been working very hard in trying to help people who are voluntarily returning back to home regarding their reintegration. So I would like to highlight that with help of IOM, in fact, next week we are trying to have discussions with funding agencies so that we could help the workers who are returning back with ways in which they could be reintegrated back into their lives back at home. I hope, am I clear now, or
yes,
is it still...
Yes, excellent. Yes, we heard you very well, and I think now you can come back with the video on. Thank you. So with this round, unfortunately, the time is up. So I do not intend to summarize this, whole great discussion this morning. But all I can say is there are still challenges, issues, but there are also opportunities if we work as partners together, as mentioned by, I think, all the panelists that we heard today. If we work as partners together, government, civil society, private sector, development partners, diplomatic community, international community, and the media, as our civil society colleague Rowena mentioned. So that is the spirit of our approach. And the United Nations Migration Network will definitely continue to support that process together with the Maldives and the people of Maldives. And with that positive note, I would like to close this first session, which was a great discussion to all of us. with big thanks to the panelists and also all of you who are attending and actively participating from the audience. So thank you very much, and back to you, Makduma.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Distinguished moderator and panelists, thank you very much once again for such an engaging discussion. Colleagues, we will now take a very short virtual break before the next panel discussion. Please don't leave the meeting. We'll start in about a couple of minutes. Thank you.
Magduma, you are muted.
Hi, Sarath, how are you?
Excellencies, honorable guests, and colleagues, thank you for staying with us. We are now about to begin the second panel discussion of the day. May I please welcome Ms. Simran Caroline Singh, Country Director for International Labour Organization in Sri Lanka and the Maldives, who kindly has agreed to moderate this panel discussion to introduce the topic of discussion and our distinguished panelists. Thank you.
Thank you, Makduma, and fellow colleagues and participants and panelists. So I'm moderating the second panel, which focuses on Objective 10, particularly of the Global Compact on Migration, which deals with human trafficking. It's about eradicating human trafficking and ensuring the well-being of migrant workers in the Maldives. Now, I've been following closely the first panel, and a number of issues have already been highlighted, including not just the challenges, but the measures, active measures that have been taken by the government and other actors to eliminate or to prevent human trafficking from happening in the context of the well-being of migrant workers. But we will delve a bit deeper into this topic because it is definitely an area of concern. As we know, the Maldives has been placed on the US State Department's Tier 2 watch list for 3 consecutive years. And it would obviously need to graduate. A number of efforts have been made, but there are huge challenges still remaining in the fact that something like 1 in 4 migrant workers in the Maldives are there irregularly, and perhaps even larger the numbers going up. There are issues that were highlighted in terms of not just accommodation, healthcare access, There are also issues with regard to female migrant workers that have been victims or potential victims of human trafficking and what might be being done about that, not to mention those that are underage as well, under adulthood. They face things like fraudulent recruitment. They lose their immigration status due to the employer's failure to pay fees for the visa. They're working in the informal sector and are quite vulnerable to sex and sexual exploitation and trafficking. We do hear cases of debt bondage and identity documents and wage confiscation. So these are quite serious issues that are considered to be cases and instances where a victim or a migrant worker is a victim of human trafficking. And certainly with COVID-19, the situation has gotten even more complicated and exposed, although some very good measures have been taken that Deputy Minister Nazima talked about in terms of access to healthcare and the regularization and registration of many of the migrant workers. We know that there is something in terms of the 2013 Prevention of Human Trafficking Act that's been amended to update it in line with the current human rights instruments and thinking. There's also a Maldivian National Anti-Trafficking Action Plan for the year 2020-2022. And there has been attempts to improve multi-sectoral coordination through a national anti-human trafficking task force and also assisting the voluntary return of stranded migrants. So it's very, very important that when it comes to the Global Compact on migration, it stresses the importance of designing, reviewing, or amending relevant policies and procedures to distinguish between the crimes of smuggling of migrants and trafficking in persons by using the right definitions and applying distinct responses. And I saw in the chats in the last session already, UNODC colleague was mentioning and brought up the issue of human smuggling as well. So there's a fine line between trafficking, regular migration, and human smuggling. And it's very important that we distinguish and clarify what is meant by those inappropriate measures are taken as a result of that. Okay, I'm going to stop here in terms of just giving you a little bit of a context, and let me introduce my four very esteemed panelists that have joined. The very first panelist is Mr. Jaishan Amir. He's the director of the Anti-Human Trafficking at the Ministry of Defense and chairman of the National Anti-Human Trafficking Steering Committee. He's led the formulation, and now he's spearheading the execution of the Maldives National Human Trafficking Action Plan that I just mentioned, that is valid till the year 2022. Before joining the ministry, Jaishan worked in broadcast journalism, speaking of media and how important they are, as well, in the Maldives and at the Embassy of the Maldives in the United Arab Emirates. His education background is in international relations, humanities, and social sciences. My second esteemed panelist is Ms. Hanifa Joffar. She's the Senior Immigration Officer, Investigation Unit, and Investigation and Legal Affairs Division under the Maldives Immigration. Her primary responsibilities include handling investigation of all matters related to violations of immigration. She began her career in 2004 working in the Border Control Division, and since then she has worked in the Citizen Service Division, Human Resources Division, and Expatriate Monitoring and Repatriation Division. Furthermore, she is actively engaged in the work of compiling the latest strategic action plan of the 2020 to 2024. Third esteemed panelist is from the US Embassy in covering Sri Lanka and Maldives. It's Mr. Anthony Renzoli. He's the acting deputy chief of mission. Anthony, he has served as a political economic counselor at the US Embassy here in Colombo since August 2018. In his career in the Foreign Service, Anthony has worked in Pakistan, India, Italy, and Turkey. From 2011 to 2013, he served as Special Assistant to the Deputy Secretary of State, William J. Burns, responsible for coordination of South and Central Asia, counterterrorism, and cybersecurity, and energy and economic policy issues. He also has worked in the State Department in DC, Washington, as Senior India Desk Officer, 2010-2011, and Sri Lanka Desk Officer prior to that. He has a bachelor's in international relations and a master's in international economic policy, both from American University in Washington, DC. And last but not least, we have Ms. Fatima Himya. She's the Secretary General of the Maldivian Red Crescent. She's been working for this movement for more than 10 years, since 2010. She was closely involved in the formation process of the Maldivian Red Crescent and contributed to the development of branches across the country and program implementation. She joined as a Secretary General of MRC in March 2020, so last year. And under her leadership, the National Society continues to respond to the, particularly focusing on the COVID-19. We know we've been very active here in terms of the pandemic, making a major contribution towards assisting the most vulnerable migrant workers affected by the crisis. She represents the Maldivian Red Crescent as a co-chair of the Red Crescent Asia Pacific Migration Network, and is also the co-chair of the Migration Leadership Group. So there you have it for very esteemed panelists here. Let me move on to the first part of this panel discussion. And I will pose two questions, and I would invite the panelists to respond to both or just one. And if they can limit their intervention to 5 minutes, it would be highly appreciated. So this is a question, I guess, which is come up also in the last panel, but really from your perspective, what are you see when it comes to human trafficking, Objective 10 of the GCM? What are the most pressing challenges that Maldives faces in achieving this objective, which aims to prevent, combat, and eradicate trafficking in persons in the context of international migration? And what are some of the ongoing planned interventions to tackle these challenges? That's one question. And then the second question, so you can pick and choose, which of the Global Compact of Migration objectives really resonate in the context of the Maldives? So which ones do you think the Maldives should really focus on to ensure the protection and well-being of migrants in areas, for example, such as healthcare that came up, living standards, etc. So that's it, the challenges, responses, and then what are the priorities under the GCM in your views? I'm going to start with Mr. Jaishan Amir. Over to you, Jaishan.
Hello, are you able to hear me? All right. Good morning to you all. Thank you so much for this opportunity. And I would like to congratulate you and your team on the launch of the UN Network on Migration. And I would also like to thank you all for giving the Ministry of Defense the opportunity to share our thoughts and views on this very important issue. So when we talk about human trafficking, I think it's very important to start on an academic note by actually defining what human trafficking is, what exactly we're talking about, because a lot of confusion comes from a lack of understanding of what exactly trafficking is, vis-a-vis other issues related to human rights and concerns in that regard. So human trafficking is a serious crime and a grave violation of human rights and human dignity. And it's defined by Article 3 of the UN Protocol to prevent, suppress, and punish trafficking in persons as the recruitment, transportation, transfer, harboring, or receipt of persons by means of the threat or use of force or other forms of coercion, of abduction, of fraud, of deception, or the abuse of power, or of a position of vulnerability, or of the giving of receiving of payments or benefits to achieve the consent of a person having control over another person for the purposes of exploitation, which shall include at a minimum the exploitation of the prostitution of others or other forms of sexual exploitation, forced labor or services, slavery or practices similar to slavery, servitude, or the removal of organs. Now, that was a very long definition, but the reason why I mentioned it is because up until very recently, the definition of human trafficking in the Prevention of Human Trafficking Act, which Simran mentioned, as us having ratified in 2013, did not include the entirety of this definition. So very recently, the president ratified the amendment to this act, which now is in harmony with the UN protocol. So our definition of human trafficking has the three constituent elements: the act, which means what is done; the means, which means how it is done; and the purpose, which stands for why it is done. Looking at the challenges, we do have a number of challenges, a lot to talk about, but I'll try to limit myself. One of the main challenges is confusion on the ground as to what actually trafficking is. And because there seems to be this idea that because we have so many undocumented workers in the country, that every single one of them is most likely a victim of trafficking, which is not the case. There could be some who have been trafficked, but there could also have been people who have been smuggled, or there could be people who have no documents on them for a variety of reasons. And the other is we need to know the distinction between trafficking and smuggling. Trafficking is something that's done against the human, the person. And smuggling is something that's done against the integrity of the state. And also, when you use the word undocumented, you have to be very careful, because every person, every foreigner or migrant worker who comes into the Maldives technically comes in with documents, some form of document, whether it's forged or not. They have a document on them. So it would be safe to not use the word undocumented all the time in all contexts. But a better word to use would be the word regular versus irregular. There could be people who come in through the regular process. Everyone comes in through the regular process, through the border agency. But they could become irregular due to a variety of circumstances. And we need to be very, very careful with the nuances of these definitions, and to make the public and also the practitioners of policy and policymakers and the judiciary and all the stakeholders involved, to make them understand of these nuances is definitely a big challenge that we're working on. And the other challenge is, of course, that there are budgetary, logistical, and temporal constraints caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, which definitely has impacted the timely execution of the Anti-Human Trafficking Action Plan, which was passed on 25th February 2020 by the Cabinet. The plan has now been revised to reprioritize the action items which are feasible, which can be done under the circumstances. And right now, we are actually, despite the constraints, we have taken and we are taking a number of landmark steps, including the securing of 1.993 million rupiah from the state budget of 2021 for anti-human trafficking activities, including the setting up of an anti-tip office at Ministry of Defense for the first time. And the recruitment for the anti-tip office, the positions that we have set up at the office is underway right now. And also, we have established a victim shelter in Guli Falo, which is in Male, Kaf Atoll, and not far away from capital Male. And we have also aligned the Prevention of Human Trafficking Act, as mentioned before, with the 2000 UN protocol, which is something that's long overdue, which was not done all these years. But after Ministry of Defense took over, we have really put our heart and soul into getting this done. And we have also held a public awareness campaign against trafficking on digital platforms to coincide with the International Migrants Day last year. It's also a first. And also we are working on formulating victim assistance and shelter service regulations so that we can ensure the smooth operation of the shelter, which is in Gurifal. And also we are conducting efforts to do a baseline study, which relates to data collection. And later this year, of course, it's not possible to do a baseline study right now because a nationwide baseline study would require inter-atoll travel, which is not possible right now due to the pandemic. And we have also been holding regular meetings of the steering committee, which was also not done previously. And we have increased reporting and engagement with our international partners, IOM, UN, and our other international partners. And the objective that resonates most with what we do is, I think, number 10, which is prevent, combat, and eradicate trafficking in persons in the context of international migration. And also, we are in talks with UNODC, one of our partners, to integrate smuggling into our mandate. So we're not far away from the future where MOD will be responsible not only for anti-human trafficking, but for anti-smuggling of migrants as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Jaishan, and you stuck to 5 minutes, 5.5. So thank you for that, both in terms of the challenges and the very real challenges, especially in light of how COVID has thrown things off, but also quite a few progressive measures that are being taken and in coordination with others. I'll get back to you on that issue of coordination later on, but for now, let me go over and ask Ms. Hanifa from Immigration to share her perspective as well. Over to you, Hanifa.
Thank you, Ms. Simran. Good morning, all of you. And from immigration perspective, I think one of the biggest challenge for us is that the lack of resources, including the safe house and other resources needed for immediate assistance, such as psychosocial support for the victims of human trafficking. But by referring to what Jaishan had said just now, I think in the near future, we will be able to overcome these challenges regarding to safe house and other resources. And apart from that, another challenge that what I believe is that a lack of mechanism to share information and intelligence among law enforcement authorities. And if this anti-tape office starts to work in the future, I think we will be able to overcome this lack of mechanism of sharing information and intelligence among us officials in the country. And another challenge, I think, would be the fear among migrant community. They have a kind of a fear in trusting the law enforcement authorities in the country. So for the fear of deportation or some kind of penalty, and the migrant workers deliberately resorting to vulnerable conditions because they are well aware of the demands and opportunities that are present in the country. And thus, they end up as victims of trafficking and other forms of exploitation victims in the country. If we are able to raise awareness, and I think we will be able to, this fear among the migrant community, I think we'll be able to make them understand what we are really trying to do here, what kind of assistance that we will be able to provide to them, rather than resorting to the undocumented channels that they are opting to. I think that's the challenges. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Hanifa, and for also just raising this issue, the psychosocial side of it, because we often tend to forget they are victims, and there are these issues, very real issues of the support needed, especially also with dimensions if they're female, but also this issue of fear and the need to deal with that very real fear once there. So I'll get back to you on some of the measures later on that as well. I'm going to hand over to Anthony now from the US Embassy to share his perspective. Over to you, Anthony.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Simran, please let me know if my audio breaks up at all. I'm at home today competing for bandwidth with the rest of my family, so sometimes a Zoom moment is possible. All right. Well, first, thanks. In the interest of time, I'll skip over most of the pleasantries, but a sincere thanks to UN, IOM, my colleagues in the ILO, Maldivian Red Crescent, and especially the government of Maldives and Foreign Secretary Joffar, whom I've known a very long time. I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak with you all today. As a US diplomat, TIP isn't my specialty per se, but as a diplomat, it's an issue I've worked on consistently throughout my whole career. And I'm always happy to have an opportunity to speak a little bit about the leadership role that the United States has taken to eradicate human trafficking. I'm very proud of that. It's one of the few issues that really gets a strong bipartisan backing in Washington at a very contentious time, whichever party is in power. So we've had a change in administration, and our advocacy to counter trafficking in persons remains the same. And I'm confident that it's helped improve the situation in Maldives as well. And we have seen some important improvements over the last few months and year that I'm sure will be reflected in the upcoming Trafficking in Persons report which will come out in a couple of months. Otherwise, in terms of U.S. perspectives, people are familiar with and can read the last trafficking persons report on Maldives, which, as with all countries, gets into some detailed recommendations. So I won't go into them in too much detail, but otherwise, I've just prepared a couple of remarks that I hope stay within the time frame to address the questions, Simreen, that you posited. Let me start with the risk factors that contribute to trafficking in Maldives. As reported in the U.S. TIP report, the large migrant labor pool working in the tourism and hospitality sector is obviously the population at greatest risk of being trafficked, though properly investigating and charging cases involving Maldivian nationals is important too. So we can't have, the U.S. doesn't believe there should be a complete monofocus on the migrant labor population. There remains a real risk that these workers, though, coming back to the migrant labor population, can be trafficked and exploited, and now is the time to address this as the country focuses on rebuilding the tourism sector after the COVID-induced slowdown. To that end, increasing oversight of labor recruitment agencies and employers and monitoring of resorts is critical. That will likely appear in the next report. The Maldivian government's limited capacity to address the issue across such a vast country is in and of itself a risk factor, and that is where we see international partners in civil society helping augment and supporting the government's efforts, as evidenced by today's event. Indeed, the launch of this UN network on migration is a very important development in this regard, so congratulations for that. In looking at the most pressing challenges the country faces for preventing TIP, the lack of information and data is, of course, important. At its most fundamental, the U.S. TIP report was intended to be a common point of reference, reviewed across consistent standards for all countries to measure the scale and scope of the problem. UN reporting requirements now oblige that which the U.S. TIP report initially set out to document. So along those lines, it's important that the government do more to increase its efforts to screen potential victims. More vigorous efforts to identify potential victims will help efforts to better understand the scale of the problem. Another pressing challenge is to make sure traffickers are held accountable for their actions. Accountability for trafficking offenses will serve as a strong deterrent to TIP. We are hopeful that new trafficking legislation, the new trafficking amendment, will bring Maldives' TIP laws in line with international standards and enhance prospects for prosecutions. Indeed, the U.S. is encouraged by the ongoing and planned interventions to combat human trafficking and Maldives' progress toward the implementation of its action plan. Funding in the state budget for the first time to establish the Office of Anti-Human Trafficking was a big step, as was the passage of the amendments to the aforementioned Human Trafficking Act to bring the definitions of TIP more in line with the Palermo Protocol. My ambassador, Ambassador Teplitz, was able to travel to Maldives earlier this year and visit the newly constructed victim shelter. This will be an important step. This is an important step to bolstering anti-trafficking efforts. We're also encouraged the Maldives Police Service elevated its human trafficking unit to a department, which will enhance investigations and prosecutions moving forward. Training frontline officials to recognize trafficking patterns and potential victims will strengthen frontline capacity, as will helping Maldives strengthen its prosecutorial capacity. And the U.S., of course, will play an important role in that. We all see the need to increase public awareness of human trafficking, especially among migrant worker population. This is another area in which the U.S. has engaged with IOM, the government of Maldives, and other partners, that is through media campaigns and events. In sum, Maldives has made significant strides toward meeting the minimum standards for the elimination of TIP, and the U.S. is committed to working with Maldives and our international partners to address TIP, trafficking in persons, as the United States and Maldives continue to strengthen important bilateral relationship that has has risen to new heights in recent years. The U.S. looks forward to working together with Maldives to further anti-trafficking efforts in the years to come as well. So thank you again, Sreen and my fellow panelists for the opportunity to speak with you today. And I'll turn it back over to you.
Hi, Anthony. Thank you so much. And very good points, including the welcome news of the assistance in terms of setting up a shelter and also increasing the prosecutorial capacity, because certainly I know with TIP reporting, the prosecution side often tends to be where the weakest link is or is considered. So thanks for sharing that challenge as well as the actions being taken. Finally, I'm going to go over to Ms. Himya from the Red Crescent to share her perspective, especially since she's been so much on the front lines working in terms of the well-being of migrant workers. So Himya, over to you, please.
Thank you, Simran. Good morning, good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me to participate in this very important discussion. And before I move ahead, a very warm congratulations for the launching of the UN Network on Migration in the Maldives. I hope that together we will be able to address the many existing issues related to migrants in the country. To begin with, regarding your question around the challenges that we are facing in achieving Objective 10, I think a lot of the panelists have more or less highlighted some of the major challenges that we are all facing. So I'll just briefly go around or highlight some of the challenges that we feel that is very significant from our side of the work. One of the biggest challenges which puts migrants into these vulnerable situations is the ineffective regulation of recruitment and employment practices. Like I think Anthony highlighted just now, that we have these corrupt practices such as quota trading, which allows employers to obtain permits to bring in more workers than needed and trade them with other employers. And victims of such situations may or may not know that they have been traded and are often unable to name or identify their employers upon arrival. So a lot of the times, the challenge is due to the victims not being aware themselves that they are being traded to begin with. And once in the country as well, they are unable to reach out or seek help or even have that information required to understand that they have been victims of trafficking to begin with. And such employers or agents or recruiters currently does not face any prosecution due to inadequate legal mechanisms and procedural gaps in the current system. And again, like all the panelists who've highlighted in this discussion and also as well as the previous discussion, a lot of legislative actions are being taken, work is being done to strengthen the legal mechanisms, but I still believe a lot needs to be done to ensure that these laws are being implemented and acted upon. Lack of procedures and standard operating procedures to identify potential victims of trafficking is another challenge. So a proper mechanism to report victims of trafficking. We do have currently systems in place, but the confidence and the trust of the migrant workers in this system is key for the potential victims to come forward. And also the lack of established mechanisms to ensure protection of victims of trafficking. So Maldivian Red Crescent works very closely with migrants, and we are quite aware that though the current government is trying really hard to build the trust with the migrant population, it was not the case in the past. And hence that the trust to be built in the mechanisms is going to take some time, and it has to be a joint effort, both by the government and also other civil society organizations. And another aspect, I think, a challenge that we face is a lot of the times the potential victims of trafficking are migrants that are working in unskilled labor categories. And again, we've come to understand that a lot of these workers are very illiterate and lacks a lot of information regarding their rights, and also where to go and to report and to get that support when they are in country, and also I guess when they are departing from their countries of origin. So the communication gap is huge when it comes to passing down information to the migrant workers because of the high illiteracy rate among these migrant workers. And I think lastly, a point that we all always discuss is the discrimination and xenophobia that the migrants face, which again makes them more vulnerable, makes them more reluctant and hesitant to come forward to any organization, not only the government, but also when it comes to approaching NGOs, or also when it comes to coming forward to organizations like the Maldivian Red Crescent. There's lots of hesitancy. And it's with years of work and commitment that we are able to build the trust, especially with these most vulnerable people. And just to highlight, I think before I end on the second part of the question where you asked whether there are other GCM objectives that the Maldives should focus on, I think definitely there are. Objective 3, which is providing accurate and timely information at all stages of migration. Like I mentioned, a lot of the existing issues related to migrants is because they don't have access to accurate and timely information. And it's something that across the board, government and civil society need to work on to ensure that they receive these information in a timely manner. And again, I would like to highlight on Objective 15, which is providing access to basic services for migrants. During our work, especially during the COVID-19 and also before that and even now, the biggest challenge, especially the undocumented migrants face, is having access to basic services such as healthcare. And I would also like to highlight, but at this point, that we've been able to work with the government in ensuring that, especially during the COVID-19 response in the pandemic, and even currently with the current lockdown, that we have been able to ensure access to migrants without identification or documents by providing some sort of identification by the Maldivian Red Crescent. And I would like to appreciate the efforts of the government in ensuring to do so. But even in this area, we have a lot of work to do, because not all the migrants who don't have access to healthcare comes forward to Maldivian Red Crescent. So I believe there's a huge number who still doesn't have this access. And Objective 16 and 17. 16 is about empowering migrants and societies to realize full inclusion and social cohesion. So we as Maldivian Red Crescent really highlight the importance of including migrants in the work that's related to migrants, because we need to empower them. We need to strengthen the migrant community so that they are able to find solutions and also work with the government and civil society in addressing the issues that exist among the migrants. And I'm very proud to say that we have some of our volunteers and members in the meeting today as well. And it's important that we all work on ensuring inclusion of migrants. And 17, of course, eliminate all forms of discrimination and promote evidence-based public disclosure to shape perception of migration. So I think I'll stop at that. Hope I've answered your question.
Thank you. Very comprehensive, Hemia. That was very, very good. I just also wanted to pick up on the issue that you raised. It seems to be a stream going through all of the panelists' feedback, which is this issue of trust. And the trust deficit that exists. So in terms of how we can go about tackling some of these issues, some looking at it from the perspective of the victim or the potential victim itself is very important. And how can one focus on building that trust? And that's where these other aspects of the GCM objectives really come in, be it the empowerment or otherwise. So thanks for sharing that. I'm going to move on to the next segment of the panel now, which should be a bit more interactive, letting the panelists speak to each other. But just to kick off, I'm going to go again to Jaishan and ask you a sort of follow-up question. You know, with trafficking in persons and efforts to combat trafficking, we often talk about the 3 Ps, the prevention, prosecution, and protection. I'm wondering if you can elaborate a little bit more in terms of what are the challenges currently being faced, as well as efforts to deal with all of those 3 Ps. And perhaps also talk a little bit more where you left off on this issue of coordination and communication, because that's definitely something we see, not just in Maldives, but in many countries. There's a coordination gap between the different entities. And I know you're working to deal with that as well. So over to you, Jaishan.
Thank you. I think when we're talking about the human trafficking situation in the Maldives, we need to understand the unique Maldivian context. I think
Jaishan, can you
that's,
speak a bit closer to the mic? It's not coming in so
sorry.
loud. Yeah, that's
Um,
better.
okay, all right, thank you. So I think when we're talking about the human trafficking situation in the Maldives, we need to start by talking about the unique Maldivian context. I think this applies to everyone, whether you're a Maldivian or whether you're an outsider, someone looking at the Maldives from the outside. Uh, our geography is very different to begin with. We are a chain of islands, 1,192 islands scattered across the expanse of the Indian Ocean. There are islands which are inhabited, around 200. There are many islands that are not inhabited. There's a lot of ocean. 99.7% of our territory is nothing but water. So this is the geographical starting point of the discussion. And then we're talking about many people, many undocumented or irregular or regular workers, foreigners living across these islands. We don't know where some of them are because it's just so dispersed, it's not centralized, it's very dispersed. So before we can start talking about anything else, we need to understand the unique geographical context and the many challenges this context poses, not only for the anti-human trafficking agenda, but also other developmental challenges that arise from this geographical challenge that we have. And as far as coordination is concerned, I think it's very important that all our international partners and local partners as well come on the same page when it comes to dealing with anti-human trafficking. And the topic of trust is once again very important here because as you can imagine, right now we're in the middle of a pandemic, and this pandemic has affected all segments of our population. No one is spared. And we've had vaccination campaign. We have had a vaccination campaign which is very successful, and both locals and foreigners, migrants, have been given vaccines. But even then, we have noticed that there are traces of xenophobia. There's a certain sense of discomfort amongst locals. When they see their foreign counterpart getting a vaccine, being ahead of them in the queue and things like that. So we need to start talking about these psychological, dimensions of this thing before we can talk about all the other technical things, because the technical things can be taken care of. You can put in place the systems, you can put in place the mechanisms, you can do things on paper, and also you can apply them into practice. But before that, we need to understand who we are doing this for. We are doing this for the people. And that needs to be kept in mind when we take every decision. And also we need to keep in mind the context and the audience. These two need to be in harmony in order for us to be able to pull off whatever we are doing in terms of executing the anti-human trafficking agenda. And your question was about the three Ps, prosecution, prevention, and protection. Of course, the pandemic has caused a number of constraints in terms of executing the three Ps of trafficking. If you look at prosecution, there is, of course, a slowdown in prosecuting some cases because, of course, now due to the many constraints, most of the court hearings, or all of the court hearings, have to be done online. And internet connectivity in the Maldives is not a very delightful subject to talk about, to be very honest. So that has caused some difficulties as well. And then in terms of protection, right now we don't have any victims with us. We did have two victims last year in the Bordofinol case. There were only two victims who were identified and handed over to us by Maldives Police Service. And we took care of the victims, we gave them their rights, and they flew back to their country of origin in December last year. So right now we don't have any victims, but we are working on setting up the entity office and getting staff who can then help us come up with guidelines, which have already been written. We have already come up with the first draft in coordination with our local partners, with some input from our international partners as well. So once we have those guidelines, we'll be able to officially open the shelter, and then any victims that we get thereafter will be transferred to the shelter. But right now we are working on the regulation and considering the unique Maldivian context. As I said before, Guli Palu is a separate island. It's not in Malay. Shelter is not in Malay. It's in a separate island. But that could cause the outsider to feel that we are isolating the victims from mainstream society, which is not the case. It's the norm here to live apart from each other because we are all, we are an island country. We are an archipelagic country. So these things need to be taken into consideration. And as far as prevention is concerned, there are efforts ongoing, awareness campaigns. We are working on our awareness campaign for 31st July, which is World Day Against Trafficking in Persons. So these efforts are being conducted right now, but our focus right now at the Ministry of Defense, as the parent ministry, the line ministry, is to set up the anti-tip office so that we can have staff working with us as a team to really, really get on the ground and get things, moving faster, because we don't have much time anyway. Thank you.
Thank you, Jaishan. I think I will ask maybe Himya to come in right now, because you've covered a lot of issues and she already talked a bit about the fact that the legal framework is there, but it's really the implementation, and then how do we actually have the standard operating procedures and all of that. So I'm just wondering if she wouldn't want to come in right now, especially to talk a bit in the context of the 3 Ps again, and what can be done in terms of, especially when it comes to the protection side of things. You said there's just 2 victims identified, that's very few. Likely numbers are higher, and then we know that there are many psychological issues as well, facing and the fear and trust issues. So maybe Himya, if you don't mind coming in, and then maybe Hanifa, you can also share a little bit from your perspective on these issues.
Yeah, thank you, Simran. I think, like I said, the key thing that we all need to first work on and address is the information regarding seeking assistance and what are the mechanisms set in place to seek that assistance. Currently, I can be very sure that among the migrant community, they are not aware of these mechanisms set up. And also they do not have any trust in these established procedures and mechanisms that once they report of such an incident, that they would be protected. And like I mentioned before, trust is an issue, because I think many a times they've come forwarded, and due to various reasons, I think in the past they might have got deported, or they might not have been protected as victims of such incidents. And these information or news travel fast within the migrant community. And due to such reasons, they do not come forward. And as Jaishan mentioned, yes, we are working very closely with the government to set up these procedures and mechanisms, and also the shelter. But I think we, at the same time, when all these are being set up, we need to focus more on creating awareness and ensuring that especially that their human rights are protected of these victims. Sometimes it's very evident that a lot of these migrant workers, when they report, they're not being paid wages for months. And sometimes they do not have the proper mechanism to request for legal assistance as well. It's a challenge in the country. And we've worked with Transparency Maldives in many and other freelance public law organizations, NGOs who offer such assistance to ensure that these migrants are represented legally when they are detained, or when they are going through the legal procedures. So there's lots of gaps that we need to identify, and a lot of support that we need to extend to these migrant workers, I believe.
Thanks, Himya. Hanifa, if I can ask for your perspective, I think, between Jaishan and Himya, they've also raised this issue of the unique Maldivian context, the islands, the geographical challenges, et cetera. And so I'm just wondering, in terms of the borders and managing the borders as well, how can it be managed in an integrated, secure, and coordinated manner without actually abusing the human rights issues that have also been raised. And Hanifa, if you could also just touch a little bit on anything specific on women victims in terms of border management, what kind of, is there anything particular that, can be done in terms of women migrants that came actually from the audience? It was one of the pre-questions, victims, and what services can be provided, because you're seeing it firsthand. Over to you.
Thank you, Simran. As a standard practice, no irrelevant of the gender, we provide victims with assistance, and victims will be provided with accommodation, healthcare, and counseling services. We have to provide these services under our law. So yes, irrelevant of their gender, male or female, we will be providing them with these arrangements and services. In addition to these, the victims will be provided with visa arrangements and documents needed if they wish to fly back to their country of origin. We will be we will communicate with relevant authorities of country of origin, the embassies here in the Maldives, and we will try to make the relevant arrangements with them. Based to your question on the integrated border control system, I think currently we do not have a fully integrated border management system in the Maldives, but we welcome interested stakeholders to do an assessment of the current system that we are actually working right now, and identify any gaps that we can that will assist us in these migrant communities, and to legalize and having said that, yes, we can. This assessment will assist us in to identify any gaps present in our system. Having said that, we are happy to facilitate with all relevant international institutions and stakeholders to institutionalize the labor management policies in the Maldives. And on this notion, we will be able to coordinate with IOM as well to establish an integrated border management mechanism to promote safe migration channels in the Maldives.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Hanifa, for that contribution. I'm going to put Anthony on the spot now, because there's been a lot of issues that come up and needs and wants, and you already outlined a number of areas in which the U.S. government, which sees trafficking as a very high priority, irrespective of which administration is in power. You mentioned that, but what more can be done? You've been hearing what the panelists have been saying. So when it comes to additional efforts, like what is the U.S. government thinking of or considering to support Maldivians, whether it is in the context of human trafficking or very related to that of safe, orderly migration and regular migration? Can you share a bit your reactions to what you've been hearing, and where you think the U.S. government could play a slightly a more leadership role, perhaps, going forward?
Okay, well, thanks, Simran, for the question. I mean, look, I mean, the TIP report itself will come out in this summer, the 2021 report, and I could certainly preview some of the recommendations that will be in there, but they're not particularly new. And I think I touched on them, others have touched on them. I think broadly speaking, we know the issues around the 3 Ps that Maldives should continue to focus on. There were some specific recommendations that Maldives has taken up now right after in fact, right in the beginning of the new reporting period, in particular the amendment. So, there's some good steps moving forward. And then obviously, our support is going to be based around building Maldives' capacity to effectuate practical steps to address the trafficking in persons problem. The trafficking in persons report is always a kind of a complicated subject for the United States and U.S. diplomats, because of course it always seems a bit judgmental for one country to be making passing judgment on another. But again, as I mentioned at the outset, I've always been somewhat proud of that because we were sort of first in this regard when nobody else was really doing it, and to bring this sort of, and to have established what remains, I would, to a certain extent, the sort of the gold standard, let's say, or the benchmark at which progress is assessed, is something that I'm proud of. So I won't go into that in detail. In terms of what the US will do, I mean, we're open to just about anything. I mean, every country faces challenges in tackling TIP. And, again, I've identified some of those challenges. Certainly, I would reiterate the issue of capacity in Maldives. With the pandemic, climate change, governance reform efforts, and other priorities, the administration in Malé has a lot on its plate. And the US is working to partner more closely with Maldives on a whole range of issues. And trafficking in persons and building Maldives is helping Maldives to support its, to bolster its trafficking in persons capacity will be one of them. But at the end of the day, every country has to take responsibility for its own anti-trafficking efforts. US or international assistance can never really be a substitute for those efforts. But I think Maldives' unique sort of capacity challenges are something we factor in. And part of that is also just a lot of interest around the world in helping to support Maldives. It has certain vulnerabilities, of course, but it also has considerable strengths. And I think the UN network in this regard is sort of a representation of a recognition of that reality to a certain. I mean, we face it in a whole range of issues where even US government agencies can be sometimes, there's a risk of tripping over ourselves in order to support Maldives, when in fact it's really important that we do this efficiently and in a way that minimizes redundancy and duplication. And so the communication between donors, including the United States, the NGOs, the INGOs, the IGOs, and the government of Maldives is really important. So I think this step is vital. One of the reasons why we were really keen to participate. But otherwise, we're working to build Maldives' judicial capacity, not just on TIP, but across the board. That's an issue on which I think we're playing a leadership role. So if the outcome of that is prosecutions, then that's certainly great. There are other, of course, vulnerabilities that could have an impact on, I mentioned climate, and of course the COVID-induced tourism slowdown could have manifestations in the TIP area. And so we're prepared to help Maldives sort of address some of those. But at the end of the day, we don't, there are consequences if one is to fall to tier 3, particularly over a protracted period of time. And that's something that's not in the interest of any partner of Maldives, certainly not in our interest. We have a range of cooperation and assistance activities in the political, security, and economic area that we wish to see preserved. And so we have a pecuniary interest as well in helping Maldives continue to build its capacity. And so we're going to do that. But of course, it does take the effort and the will, which we see on the part of the government of Maldives, to sustain that over the longer term.
Thanks, Anthony. And it's good to hear that you're also going to be partnering with other development partners so that we can collectively also tackle this, but also focusing on some of the broader issues as well. So it's not just a singular focus on this one issue, but the judicial reform and implementation as well. So that's great. I understand we have 3 minutes left for this panel. There were some technological glitches at the beginning, so we started late. So I'm going to just ask one question that I see has come up in the chat box, and it's for Jaishan. It has to do with the fact that, hold on a second, it's asking about what are the practical strategies in place to investigate and prosecute organized crime networks and other elements facilitating trafficking. I think that's a comment that came in from Gwen. Do you want to say something a bit about this? Because this issue of the organized crime is also very particular to the trafficking side of things. So if you could shed a little bit of light on that, and then we'll wrap up. Over to you, Jaishan.
Sure. Can you hear me? Yeah, all right. So my response to that question would be to say that, yes, we do have intelligence-led investigations and operations going on, even in the middle of the pandemic. In fact, I was informed by a group of officers that an operation was conducted last week as well. But there are difficulties on the ground when it comes to conducting these operations and investigations. Lack of staff, lack of personnel is one area that we need to work on, because as you can imagine, not having enough people to work together as a team is definitely a problem, because one person can only do so much within the given 24 hours. So, and we're talking about dispersed incidences. So we need more people in order to be able to attend to these dispersed incidences and operations at the same time. So a practical strategy to achieve that, I think one strategy that we can do is to get more people and get more officers and get more trained people to help us do these operations, because right now, and also there's a lack of training. This is something that I was told, I was informed of by immigration, my colleagues at immigration as well. There's a lack of training. And we're not just talking about one-off workshops and seminars. We're talking about sustained, consistent, regular refresher courses, which come in every three months, preferably. So most of these officials and officers have been trained before, but their training consisted only of a very tiny, minute human trafficking component, which should not be the case. It should be entirely focused on human trafficking. And we are working with IOM and our other international partners to get these trainings so that our officers are confident, whether they're police officers or immigration officers, they're confident and very, very sure about what they're doing, and they can go and and also one more component or one more sub-component of this should be the topic of trust, how they can win the trust of potential victims, people who have just, people who could potentially be victims, but then they're afraid to tell, their situation, to explain themselves. And also another thing is the language barrier. This is something we need to be aware of, the language barrier. As you know, the language here is Divehi, our own language, but we also speak English widely. English is widely spoken, but then in the international context, we need to understand that most of these victims do not speak Divehi, and they also don't speak English that well. So we need to have staff, we need to have officers who can speak a variety of languages, so who can have access to effective language tools, not just Google Translate. Google Translate is what's being used right now. That's not enough. We need to add that human element to this, human touch to it, so that it's very different when you have someone, speaking the language and winning your trust subconsciously to tell them exactly who made you a victim of human trafficking. Thank you.
Thank you. And it's important to raise the issue that it's just not enough people or human resources. And even if there were, the capacity areas that need to be built are quite significant. I think this panel is so good. All of you all need to be cloned to be able to really serve the population. Listen, I'm going to wrap this up right now, but just before I do, and thank you all, because it's been a really rich discussion, and the commitment from all of you is more than evident going forward, and the passion for working on this too. So thank you for that. I'm going to just ask each one of you, if you were to prioritize what the UN Network on Migration can assist when it comes to the human trafficking or irregular migration, in 3 words, what would be the 3 words that you would say should be the priorities? So I know I've thrown this at you, you're not prepared for this, but it must be in your heart. So whoever wants to go first, just 3 words from your perspective, what should be prioritized, what area? Who wants to go first?
I can go first.
Okay, Hania.
I think just to be very short and precise, it's protecting the rights of the migrants. And I think we are not able to do it, nowhere near where we should be. So there's a lot we need to do. Yeah.
So protecting, okay. Who's next?
I think, Simran, as I mentioned in my remarks, I think for the network to coordinate and in and of itself prioritize assistance activities would be hugely beneficial. This would allow governments like mine to look at our own resources and apply them in a most efficient and strategic way.
Thank you. Coordination, okay, good. Hanifa or Jaishan, which one?
I think, okay. My 3 words would be build back better, because as you can see, the National Anti-Human Trafficking Action Plan has been kind of derailed in terms of the schedule that we had set for it. So we need to do some cleaning up and some shifting of priorities and to really get it done before the deadline that we have set, which is 2022. So we need to, the end of 2022, 30th December 2022. So we need to, build back better in terms of do things that are left to be done, and then, get the ball rolling in areas that have not been addressed so far. For example, the baseline study. It's something I myself, on a personal note, I'm very excited about, because the baseline study has never been done before, and doing so would be a great win for us.
Thank you. Build back better. Those seem to be the words going around. I lost Hanifa on video. I don't know if she's still there. Hanifa, are you there? Maybe a tech problem. We're all having that. Okay, I don't. Yes.
I can fill in for Hanifa.
Okay.
My colleague, so she has texted me. I think she's having some problem with Zoom.
Okay.
So her 3 words are capacity building and awareness.
Very good.
Capacity building and awareness. Yes.
Very good. Very good. Great. Thank you all so very much. And I think I can say on behalf of the UN family that we are really pleased to be launching this going forward, this network, and look forward to working in a more coordinated way to build capacity, to raise awareness, and collect the data and whatever else it takes to protect the rights of many vulnerable workers, both victims as well as those that are prone to become victims. So thank you so much, and over to you, Makduma.
Thank you very much, moderator and the panelists, for such an interesting discussion. Colleagues, we are now about to move on to the next item in our agenda. To observe this virtual launch, the UN Network on Migration in the Maldives has put together a video. We are now going to share the video with you. For such an interesting discussion. Colleagues, we are now about to move on to the next item in our agenda. To observe this virtual launch, the UN Network on Migration in the Maldives has put together a video. We are now going to share the video with you.
The Republic of Maldives is one of the major destinations for international migrants in South Asia. Migration is a defining characteristic of the small island economy. In recent years, the country has heavily relied on international migrant workers to overcome labor shortages in tourism, construction, education, and health sectors. Official estimates suggest that more than 60,000 of the migrant workers in the country are irregular, making them very vulnerable to exploitation and human trafficking. The COVID-19 pandemic has hit migrant communities disproportionately. Overcrowded accommodations of low-income migrants left them highly exposed to disease outbreaks. With the lockdown, travel restrictions, and business closures, many migrants also suffered job and income losses. Migrants have also been at the forefront of the pandemic response, providing life-saving medical care, relief distribution, and sustaining critical services during the lockdown. Adopted in 2018, the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly, and Regular Migration, GCM, is the first intergovernmentally negotiated cooperation framework covering all dimensions of international migration in a holistic and comprehensive manner. In 2020, the UN system formed the UN Network on Migration in the Maldives. The network is established to ensure coordinated support to the government of Maldives in implementing the GCM and other relevant priorities in the migration arena. In recent policy and legal interventions, the government of Maldives has launched new and revised regulations on expatriate employment consisting of guidelines and rules on complementary areas, such as registering with the online expat system, the grant of approval to work in the country, arrangements and standards of accommodation, and disciplinary measures for breaches, among others, to promote safe, orderly, and regular migration.
The Global Compact for Migration is a set of goals to help UN member states build safe and orderly pathways for people migrating. It's a blueprint that governments can use to better manage migration and a roadmap to help maximise the benefits of migration whilst minimising the risks. Migration is a defining characteristic of the Maldives and will continue to remain so. The aim of the UN Network on Migration in the Maldives is to provide effective, timely, and coordinated UN system-wide support to the government of Maldives to better manage migration in line with international commitments. Together, we can protect the safety, dignity, and human rights of everyone in the country.
The 2030 Agenda recognizes the contribution of migration to sustainable development. Many SDG targets, including reducing inequality, can be achieved by enhancing migration governance through the implementation of the Global Compact for Migration, which contains 23 objectives and commitments. It provides a menu of actions states can choose from, as well as best practices to improve migration systems based on their realities and capacities. Migrant participation in the journey to building a more sustainable future will reinforce the 2030 Agenda's core principle to leave no one behind.
The UN Network on Migration of the Maldives will bring together relevant stakeholders, including the government of Maldives, migrant workers, UN agencies, civil society, local communities, academia, the private sector, development partners, national human rights institutions, and the media together. It aims to promote a whole of government and a whole of society approach in fulfilling the objectives of the Global Compact on Migration, including safeguarding decent working conditions for migrant workers.
The Global Compact supports gender-responsive policies that address the needs and vulnerabilities of migrant women, men, girls, and boys. The United Nations Network on Migration in the Maldives will act as a source of sharing ideas, tools, reliable data, and analysis on migration issues.
Let me begin by saying that we at UNHCR have been a supporter of the Global Compact for Migration because it's an important opportunity to put in place a system for international governance which would ensure enhanced protection for the human rights of migrants, but also strengthen the existing refugee protection regime. The proposed migration network will assist the government of the Maldives to implement the Global Compact for Migration in accordance with the country's specific migration realities and capabilities. By way of conclusion, let me also say that it is crucial to maintain the distinction between migrants and refugees.
Human trafficking and smuggling of migrants are amongst the serious transnational organized crimes that the government of Maldives is committed to addressing. The Global Compact for Migration is an invaluable tool to prevent, combat, and eradicate these crimes by protecting victims. At the network, we promote better migration management with respect for rule of law and access to justice.
The Global Compact for Migration promotes the protection of human rights, including children's rights, as agreed by the Convention of the Rights of the Child when families migrate. The network upholds the principle of the best interest of the child to ensure that every child is protected, is able to learn, and has a healthy life.
Maldives is home to many migrant workers. The government and UN value their contribution to the national development, and we consider it our responsibility to be sensitive to their needs. We are happy to note that access to healthcare of the migrants is being addressed as a human right. Furthermore, occupational safety is adequately addressed, which is the need of the hour in the Maldives. Access to healthcare and leaving no one behind is critical to accomplish the sustainable development goal, which we as a UN team are collectively trying to achieve with the government. WHO is a proud member of the UN Network on Migration in the Maldives in taking forward these international commitments.
International Organization for Migration is honored to serve as the Secretariat and also as the coordinator of the United Nations Network on Migration in Maldives. IOM will ensure that there is a well-coordinated UN support is extended to the government of Maldives in its effort to promote safe, orderly and regular migration for the socio-economic development of the country.
Together for migration.
International Organization for Migration is honored to serve as the Secretariat and also as the coordinator of the United Nations Network on Migration in Maldives. IOM.
Colleagues, we now move on to the last segment of our event today. It's my pleasure to invite the representative of UNICEF in the Maldives, Ms. Marjan Montezemi, to kindly extend her vote of thanks.
Thank you very much, Mokhtouma. Excellencies, honorable chief guests, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. It was really great to hear the rich discussion today and learn about all the various initiatives that have already been taken or initiated in the Maldives by the government and CSOs, but also by the countries of origin of migrants, and notably Bangladesh and Nepal, towards safe migration. It was also equally important to acknowledge the work that still needs to be done in terms of communication, systems building, as well as the community level work that needs to be done to protect the rights of all migrants. Please allow me to express our heartfelt gratitude to the government of Maldives, without whose support today's event would not have been a success. After establishing the UN Network on Migration in Maldives, we have been discussing bringing together the government, UN agencies, and all relevant stakeholders in the migration field, including migrants themselves, to formally launch the network. I am delighted today that we were able to celebrate this launch. UNICEF is an active member of the network, and as we know that around the world, millions of children of migrants or child migrants face protection risks and restricted access to services. UNICEF stands ready to work with member states to further engage with young people and in designing and implementing migration policies that uphold child rights, take into account access and protection of children, and to ensure safe migration. Today's launch is an important milestone that demonstrates the collective commitment of government, diplomatic representatives, civil society organizations, UN agencies, migrants, private sectors, academia, and the media to work together for the well-being of migrants, to promote safe, orderly, and regular migration, and to prevent counter-trafficking. The government of Maldives' unwavering commitment to the implementation, review, and follow-up of the Global Compact, also known as GCM, is well noted and sincerely appreciated. The network stands ready to engage with and support all your efforts in the implementation, review, and follow-up of the GCM, particularly around the lead up to the International Migration Review Forum that is planned for 2022 and beyond. We would like to express our sincere gratitude and appreciation to Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs, His Excellency Abdullah Shahid, for his enlightening video message, which he kindly sent as he could not manage to join us today due to other pressing commitments. It was an absolute honor for us as the UN Network for Migration in the Maldives to have our chief guest, His Excellency Abdul Ghafur Mohammed, Foreign Secretary, for his kind and encouraging presence at this high-level launching event. Profound gratitude goes to the officials at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of Economic Development, and the Ministry of Defense for their support, without which it would have been challenging to organize this event. I would also wish to extend our heartfelt thanks to the excellencies from the Diplomatic Corps, distinguished panel moderators and speakers from diverse entities for engaging in insightful panel discussions. Your active participation today meant a lot, and we count on your continued engagement. We know such a brief time is not enough to accommodate all the questions and comments, but we consider this as a new starting point, a new beginning for dialogue around safe migration in the Maldives. We have drawn on your expertise, support, and reflections, and are looking forward to continuing the conversation and working together closely. My sincere appreciation to the resident coordinator, who is very passionate about promoting safe migration in the country and remained engaged from the very beginning of the network's formation. And finally, I'm grateful to the coordinator and secretariat of the UN network in the Maldives, our sister agency, International Organization for Migration, for coordinating UN efforts to launch this network. Thank you all, and we are here together for migration. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Montezemay. Excellencies, distinguished guests, officials from the government of Maldives, moderators, panelists, attendees of this event, colleagues from the UN, media, private sectors, academicians, stakeholders working to promote safe migration, and migrants who joined us today for this event. We are also connected, who are also connected with us via our Facebook page, where this event is being live streamed. Thank you very much for staying with us throughout this launching event. At the Secretariat of the UN Network on Migration in the Maldives, we look forward to remain engaged with you to continue the dialogue and cooperation around safe, orderly, and regular migration. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The event is closed. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.